is somebody going to tell Israel that the damage that it's doing, not only to its own people, but the people throughout the world, Jewish people throughout the world, are having a hell of a time?
It is very important not to have disinformation, particularly about Israel. All the operatives we met have been either killed or abducted and the equipment destroyed. However, since that time, Israel, which has never denied Gaza humanitarian aid, now has the capacity to pass 44 trucks per hour into Gaza. And indeed, on March the 10th, the most recent date, 150 lorries passed through, supplying 3,750 tonnes of food, which is equivalent to £4 per person. If we are to seek peace and reconciliation and a ceasefire, does he not agree with me that it is very important not to have disinformation, particularly about Israel, which has always sought to ensure that humanitarian aid is supplied wherever it can? The problem has been the UNRWA distribution thereof.
My Lords, we've been very clear about the importance of aid entering Gaza unimpeded. There have been claims and counterclaims, and the United Kingdom has been very clear that Israel is not letting enough trucks through the crossing. The number my noble friend quotes, yes, that is factual, but it's also true that 500 trucks were entering before the war. Now, there is some statements made around commercial items were included within that. Yes, they were, but there was also food that was grown in Gaza, which is no longer possible, and that is why there is an acute need. The 500 that is stated consistently is not a high threshold, it's the minimum threshold, and it's needed now.
Is the noble lord aware of how much of the aid is getting through but is not being distributed because it's being siphoned off by Hamas? Does he have any figures on that end of the scale?
My Lords, on all the aid that first of all gets through, that is checked first and foremost by the Israelis themselves at the various checkpoints, including, as my noble friend said, at Kerem Shalom, which has a very enhanced capacity which needs to be fully utilized. On the issue of aid within Gaza, it is undoubtedly a fact that the chaos that is currently in Gaza, there is no infrastructure, the roads are no longer fully operational. There are some military roads which has allowed certain countries, including recently, as reported, Morocco, to deliver aid to the north of Gaza. What we need is a consistent support from the Israeli authorities on the ground to ensure aid distribution. UNRWA did provide a vital function. I have already reiterated again our shock, horror and abhorrence of the report against UNRWA, and UNRWA are taking actions. We haven't yet resumed funding, but we are looking at that very carefully. What is really important, and what the difference is between Hamas, a terrorist organization, and Israel, a government. Israel has obligations under IHL which it needs to fulfill as a government with responsibility to the Geneva Conventions, and there are many in Israel, including many NGOs, who are very reflective of that very point. I've met with many hostage families who also are shocked by what they see in Gaza, notwithstanding the old horror that they're continuing to face themselves. And that's why we're clear. Stop this fighting now. Let the hostages be released. Let humanitarian aid enter Gaza unimpeded. And then we can talk for the medium long term on peace, security, which is an equal right of both Israelis and Palestinians.
I do not meet many people in the course of my life who are not influenced by what's happening in Gaza. And I can honestly say that most of the people I meet and talk to, people from all walks of life, are appalled at what Israel is doing. The point I'm making is somebody going to tell Israel that the damage that it's doing, not only to its own people, but the people throughout the world, Jewish people throughout the world, are having a hell of a time because of what's actually happening there. And this is the worst form of foreign policy that is ever being done. And it is terrible, absolute. The amount of antisemitism you see around the world, and it's because of the fact that Israel is not thinking the next 5 or 10 years, but is only thinking immediately.
My Lords, I assure the noble Lord that we make very clear to Israel as both a friend and a partner to Israel, not just about its responsibilities to the appalling humanitarian situation in Gaza, but also about the importance of acting in the rights of all its citizens to, for example, with Mr. Gantz, again, let's not forget Israel, 22% of its population is Arab, Christian and Muslim. Israel is a democratic state. It has important security concerns which need to be directly supported, but equally, we are very clear that the only way of securing peace, stability and security in the region is to ensure an immediate stop in the fighting now, to get the hostages released, to let in the humanitarian aid. And there is a lot of work, including being done directly by my noble friend, the Foreign Secretary, and myself, on the diplomatic front, to ensure that this shocking chapter in the history of Israel and across the Palestinian territories is one of those shocks that we can actually address quite directly and bring peace and stability and security through the two-state solution. I assure the noble Lord we're working diplomatically extensively on that point as well.
My Lords, the time for this private notice question is now up, so we move to next business of the House. The Lord Privy Seal. Earl Howe.